Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you. Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we are talking about pride and about queerness in film. I am Lauren Humphreys Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson.
Hello.
Hi. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm good. How are you?
I am also good. We're both good.
We're great.
For the first time, just like, oh, I'm tired. I do this, do that. It's just like, no, I'm good. I'm good. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been a really, really busy couple of months, really. But you know, like people listening know I work at a college, and the end of the semester is chaos, and we have graduation, and then we go right into the next week where summer school starts. I don't have downtime in my department, and then I had a conference, and then I was in charge of a conference, so it's like for the past 4 weeks straight, it's just been go 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 go, and all of that is over now, and I get to just kick back and enjoy my summer, and I'm so happy.
Yay! Hurrah!
Yeah, I mean, I am still tired. That's not going to change, but I'm also, a middle-aged woman, so of course I'm still tired.
Also, you're just a human being in the year 2024, so
also
it's
true.
Just like, I am tired, but that's like a normal thing. Everyone that I talk to is like, sorry, tired, but good.
Yeah,
good, I'm good.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So I am good. How are you?
I am also good. It is gorgeous in New York right now. Very excited about that. It's particularly fucking hot yesterday, but it's very nice and temperate today. So
lovely. We have a heat advisory today, so I'm gonna be spending the entire day indoors.
It was horribly hot yesterday and really fucking humid. Like I went up to the grocery and I'm just drenched in sweat. It's just like, okay, it's like walking into a sauna sometimes, but it's quite nice now. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I think I saw it. Sorry guys, we do the weather thing. This is when we talk. So I saw online yesterday that there's like a heat dome over your part of the country. So
yeah,
and it seems fun.
It seems to I'll have to ask my parents, who are much further upstate than I am, if they're getting some crazy weather, because it's quite nice in New York. Like I'm gonna go out later. Like
oh, that's good. That's good.
So yes, it's lovely. So yes, that is the weather report from New York City and Los Angeles, California. So that's you got everything covered from coast to coast.
That's what we do here.
It's really the only two cities that matter. Let's just face it. So I'm gonna piss off so many people. So today we wanted to talk. This is Pride Month. And last week, I mean, we talked about some pretty serious shit last week, actually. But I think some really important stuff. And this week, we're going to talk about some really important stuff as well, but particularly to talk about kind of the representation of gay people in Hollywood and actors who at the time it was sort of an open secret about their sexuality, but were not allowed to be obviously openly gay, to the point that it was dangerous. It could have destroyed their careers. And there's still that issue, I think, running throughout Hollywood today, that there's still that question, like people coming out or not coming out. It's kind of a weird period right now where there's a lot of fan pressure on actors to reveal their sexuality, particularly if they play queer characters on screen. And so there's been some of this weird stuff going on about like essentially trying to out people, like fans trying to out people, or forcing actors to essentially say like, no, I'm not gay. Like, I'm sorry, I'm straight. It's a very strange time period right now because there's still kind of that stigma that's attached to it. But then also this like almost stigma that's being attached to if you are straight playing a queer character, it's very odd. And then also just that sense of forcibly outing anybody or trying to make them disclose their sexuality is just, don't do that. Like don't, if you're a journalist or if you're a fan or anything like that, don't make assumptions about people. Just generally, if they want to say their sexuality, they will. But really, honestly, it's none of our business.
Yeah, there's this weird duality that happens where people want to be able to say like, well, why does my sexuality matter? But also you need to tell me if you're gay. Like they want it both at the same time. Like it's like there's this sense that people want that to just be something that I don't even know how to describe it, but like I remember a couple of years ago when the new season of the morning show came out, and in that, it was the third season, I think, or second. I can't remember how many seasons there have even been. Anyway, Juliana Margulies was on it, and she was playing a lesbian character, and people were very upset about it and like, oh well, why is she playing this character? She's straight. And she was like, don't make assumptions about anything. Like you just don't know, and that's not something that I would like to talk about.
Well, and that's the thing. There is that is this attitude of like trying to forcibly out people, to like make them state their sexuality if they're celebrities, right? Especially like you've got to show your credentials essentially. And then not believing people as well when they say like no, either I don't want to talk about it or no, actually, like that's just it's very weird. It is a very weird thing to do, and it. What's weird, I think, right now is that it's coming from members of the queer community. It's coming from like fans who are like, oh no, she's totally gay, or oh no, he's totally gay. And it's like, but he doesn't want to talk about that. Like if he wanted to tell people, he would. Like maybe he does tell his personal friends, right? But you're fans, and there's still all of that stigma that's attached to it in Hollywood and like getting roles and things like that. So it's just it's a very strange thing. And at the same time being like, oh, we shouldn't care about people's sexuality or people's gender identity. It's like, you can't
that's
have
that
both,
weird duality.
then.
It's like it needs to not be a big deal, but also we want to make sure that the people are all out, and it's such a personal thing. Like I remember Neil Patrick Harris when he came out, people made a big deal about that, but he played Barney on How I Met Your Mother, and that's like a super womanizing character and stuff. And it's like, yeah, he's a really talented actor. Guess what?
He's an actor. Oh my God. You can play different parts that have nothing to do with who you are as a person.
Now, that does not mean that you should play characters of different races.
We're having a different conversation there. Like, there's a lot of permutations here, but it's just on a blanket thing. Well, speaking of actors,
and also it's 2024. Let trans people play trans people. Anyway,
no shit. Well, speaking of actors who played representatives of virile masculinity, and were themselves gay, let's talk about Rock Hudson. This week we're going to talk about Rock Hudson. We're specifically going to talk about Rock Hudson's three major films with Douglas Sirk. And these are Magnificent Obsession from 1954, All That Heaven Allows from 1955, and Written on the Wind from 1956. These are kind of the major of the Sirk melodramas. Sirk did a number of melodramas in the 1950s, but those films, and then Imitation of Life, which was also a remake, are kind of the big ones. They're like the big Technicolor, bright, intense, campy, soap opera-y films that he did. And it's interesting that you've got Hudson as kind of one of the central figures in all of them. But before we get into those films, we wanted to talk a little bit about who Hudson was. And I think most people know who Rock Hudson is. Like, if you haven't seen some of the Sirk melodramas, he's such a typical kind of 1950s American male. He's tall, he's broad, he's good looking. And he always played these incredibly, quote, virile examples of masculinity. He played cowboys. He played the womanizing ad executive. He did a number of films with Doris Day, many of which are incredibly reactionary, by the way. but that are these kind of 1950s sex comedies, right? That very much make use of Hudson's kind of persona as this incredibly confident, masculine, kind of the perfect American man, right? That was very much the way that he was represented. It was known in Hollywood that Hudson was gay. And this was something that, like, to even the point that I believe it was Confidential magazine. And this gets referenced a number of times in like other stories and other films. This is referenced, I think, in LA Confidential. Yeah, so in 1955, Confidential magazine was going to publish basically an expose about Hudson's homosexuality, and Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, essentially bought them off by giving information about two of Wilson's other clients, Rory Calhoun and Tab Hunter, and essentially just threw the two of them under the bus in exchange for protecting Hudson's secret. And not long after that, Hudson actually married Henry Wilson's secretary. And there's been all of this question about, like, did she know that he was gay at the time? Was she aware of what was going on? And it's kind of, there are a lot of different arguments about this. And like some people are like, oh, she was actually a lesbian. But she was definitely, I think that's pretty obvious that she was definitely being used one way or another to kind of conceal the truth about Hudson's homosexuality. One of the things you have to remember about this time period in Hollywood is that being outed as gay, even in a tabloid, so even if you like deny, it is still going to have an incredibly detrimental effect on your career. You've got people that are signed into like morality contracts, and that can include things like having extramarital affairs. So it's not even just like the big one of homosexuality. Homosexuality is criminalized in a lot of places. So at this point, like Hudson being outed, or anyone being outed at that time, would have just completely destroyed their careers. Yeah. Even if it's known in Hollywood, and this seems to be like one of the common threads with Hudson, is that everybody knew that Hudson was gay. But it wasn't talked about. It was an open secret, and it was something that that wasn't going to be something that people were going to have a conversation about publicly in any way, because it would have just destroyed him.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we have to remember. This wasn't that long ago. Not in terms of Hollywood history, not in terms of regular history. Like when being outed could get you arrested, could get you thrown in prison, would definitely destroy your life in a really real way. Like this was not, just an imaginary fear. This was something that would happen and could happen. Hudson,
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we started talking about this a little bit before the episode started, but we were talking about when he did eventually come out. And I remember that, and we'll get into, I think we're going to get into a little bit more of that in a minute. But I remember what a big deal that was. I was a kid. I was really young. And this was probably the first time that I heard the word gay in that context. Before that, gay just meant happy, and I had never heard it that way before, but I can remember being in the grocery store with my mom and seeing all the tabloids for weeks, and just people made such a big deal about it. And it's like when you and that was in my childhood, and and granted I'm old, but still it wasn't that long ago.
It really wasn't that long ago. Like that's the thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And so it's like, of course people were and still continue sometimes to be, very private about this, because of the fact that it can have this huge, not impact, that's not the right word, but just kind of this big ripple. Like people just make such an uprising about someone, about someone's sexuality. It's ridiculous. And and the first time that I distinctly remember seeing that happen was with Rock Hudson.
Well, and with Rock Hudson, this is, something else we should talk about. With Rock Hudson, his outing, right, his coming out was in conjunction with disclosing his AIDS diagnosis.
Yes.
So he was one of the earliest known people to even contract AIDS. He was diagnosed with HIV in 1984, June 5th, 1984. This was before the AIDS crisis really got going in the United States. Before, like, very, very little was known about this disease. So he kept it a secret and went through, you know, at first his publicist said that he had liver cancer, basically. So he was getting emaciated. He was in the throes of a really terrible disease. And then finally, I think it was in 1985, July 25th, 1985, his publicist just disclosed the fact that, yes, he has an AIDS diagnosis, and at the same time revealed that he was gay. So it was like a 1-2, and he was one of the earliest celebrities to be diagnosed with AIDS and to also die from AIDS. And it's like you say, it's shocking in some ways, but it's like this. So this was someone. I think that one of the things that we have to talk about with Hudson's on-screen persona is that there is this attitude, obviously, towards the way that gay men look and act and speak, etc. And Rock Hudson in the 1950s is not that.
Right.
Right. He is, again, this virile masculine man. And he's very much portrayed as that on screen. And in fact, it's interesting the times where there are these tacit references to Hudson's sexuality. And one of the most kind of famous ones is a scene in Pillow Talk where he pretends to be gay in order to kind of worm his way into Doris Day's affections. But it's surprising, like, it's both incredibly stereotypical and also surprisingly explicit that that's what's going on. So in this scene, he begins doing kind of all of the stereotypical gay male things, right? He raises his pinky when he drinks. He's really interested in interior design. He like changes the way that he talks to like that kind of more what's usually referred to as like more effeminate lisping that was so associated with stereotypical gay men that would be recognized in the 1950s. And you can see within the context of the film, you can see Doris Day's character going like, oh, like you can see the wheels turning and her sort of beginning to lean in and going like, okay, like, and the whole joke is, of course, that he's not gay, like he's actually trying to get into her pants, basically. But it's really this odd metatextual thing, especially watching it in 2024, when you're like, but Rock Hudson's not only gay, everyone knew that Rock Hudson was gay in 1955. And also he knows he's gay and he's doing this performance. And so it's this interesting layer of like performance of masculinity and performance of gender and of sexuality that kind of in a kind of an interesting way sort of says that all of Hudson's performances are performances. He's pretending to be this like representative of something that he isn't. And so it's really he's a fascinating figure on screen because he comes off with like this incredible like heterosexual masculinity while at the same time threading through these elements of camp and then the more metatextual reality of who he is as a person and who we know he is as a person. So any other thoughts about that before we go on to Douglas Sirk?
Not really. I think that you nailed it really well. I guess I do also just want to mention, just kind of going back to the first episode we did this month with Anthony Perkins, who also died of AIDS in 1991. And so it was something that, I mean, that is what it took, I think, for people to really pay attention to the crisis that was brewing. And I don't want to make this all about AIDS, but it took losing celebrities like Anthony Perkins, like Freddie Mercury and Rock Hudson to really draw attention to this being the crisis that it was. Kind of, this is a weird comparison maybe, and forgive me if it is, but like people didn't start taking COVID seriously until Tom Hanks got it. You know, it's like, that's just kind of how people roll sometimes in this world, is until it starts to affect the recognizable faces that we see on our screens, that's when we start to actually pay attention to these things. So sorry.
It's no, definitely. I think it's that sense of visibility. And it's also the fact that, you know, people like Tony Perkins and Rock Hudson who were closeted pretty much their entire lives, right? Again, it's that kind of open secret. They were closeted, but everybody knew. And they were living as gay men as well. But also I think that, when it comes to the AIDS crisis and when it comes to all of that, is that it's sort of, it reveals that, they walk among us. It's that attitude, like there have always been gay people.
Right.
Many of your favorite celebrities have been gay or bisexual, or pansexual, etc. And that is a reality. And so they've been a part of American culture forever. Queer people have been around forever. And it's that refusal to acknowledge and refusal to, to kind of pretend. And I think that Hudson, even more so than someone like Tony Perkins, is, I don't want to say shocking to the mainstream because of his on-screen persona.
Yes, exactly.
And then it's like, okay, so gay men do not look like the stereotype that we have of gay men all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Maybe you can't just tell if someone is gay by looking at them.
Are you saying, Lauren, that there's not just one way to be gay?
Amazing that there are different types of queer people in the world. And that and that they're people too. Amazing. Yeah. So let's talk about the Sirk melodramas, which are, when it comes to camp and queerness, I think it's kind of hard to get campier than some of these melodramas. And it's all about like the externalization of everything. Like all of these films deal with, people getting sick or being hurt or dying as a result of these like intense emotions that they're being forced to repress. And this comes up again and again and again. But let's start with Magnificent Obsession, which is a 1954 film, stars Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson, and is probably the most batshit in terms of plot of all three of these films. So spoiler alert, probably going to spoil some of this if you haven't seen these films, just to let you know. They're great. They're all available on Amazon Prime right now. Definitely check them out. So Magnificent Obsession begins with the death of this wonderful doctor who leaves behind a widow, Jane Wyman, and the reason why he dies is because he has a heart attack, and his resuscitator has been taken to save the life of a playboy played by Rock Hudson, Bob Merrick, played by Rock Hudson, who basically just crashes his boat and because he's doing reckless and stupid things. And so this all starts with about the first 10 minutes. You get poor Jane Wyman being widowed, and this wonderful man who should have lived, dies when this bad man, this man who doesn't deserve to live, as it were, lives. All right, so after this death, then things get even weirder. So Bob Merrick is like, oh no, I'm a playboy, I don't care about anything. And then he basically meets Jane Wyman and discovers like this truth about her husband, who's this great doctor, and that he's alive because this doctor is dead. And this kind of sets him off on this spiritual journey to like become a better human being and to like learn about this sort of, it's one of those like kind of 1950s spiritual things that is not really religious but is about like paying it back, basically like paying things forward and like living for other people. This eventually turns into him accidentally blinding Jane Wyman. And then a whole thing developing out of that, because nothing could go right in this poor woman's life. And like every time he steps into it, it just gets worse. So
she loves him.
And she falls in love with him as a result of it. And he falls in love with her. And then there's like, we're gonna figure out he's gonna become a brain surgeon and learn how to operate her. And it just like gets stranger and stranger and stranger. So what are your thoughts about this film, Karen? It is such a wild film. It's so well done, but at the same time, so over the top melodramatic.
Yeah. Well, it's I mean, it's a morality play, right? It's you got this guy who has this profound experience in his life and realizes that he needs to make some changes, and so he makes those changes and he becomes this good person and everybody loves him. And and yet, and so yeah, and it's silly, it's ridiculous. Poor Jane Wyman, everything goes wrong, like you said, around him. Like her life becomes exponentially worse by knowing him. And yet it's, I don't know, there's this sweetness about it. And so it's like, it's ridiculous and silly, but it's not totally ridiculous. And it's actually, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say, but it's a nice movie. Like,
it is, and it treats, I think it treats its characters very kindly, actually.
yes.
Like it is silly, you get these things, but it's within this context of, first of all, we are set for the melodrama because the big like inciting incident happens within the first 5 minutes of the film. And so we kind of know what film we're in at that point. Like this is going to get crazy, right? And all the things that happen are not impossible, right? It's not so extreme that they're not evil twins and phantom pregnancies and things like that. It's
right.
It's possible, but it's just really extreme. And it is this externalization, I think, of like you say, of morality, and this whole idea about like, how can a good man die and not a bad one, but just like an undeserving one live? How can a deserving man die, and how can an undeserving one live? And what does that mean? And that's one of the things that the Hudson character struggles with, is basically feeling that he's undeserving. He's like, this man is dead because of me, and I don't really deserve to be alive. And him kind of finding a way through that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is why this film works, is because of the fact that Rock Hudson does such a great job of really embodying this. Like, I don't deserve this, but I'm going to do what I can with it. Like he sells it, I mean, that could be, if you have the wrong actor in that part, it just feels silly, and it feels like, oh, it's performative. He's doing good things just to look good because everybody's mad at him. Whereas with Rock Hudson, you really feel that sense of him actually changing and growing as time goes on. And so I think that is why this is a film that, even though it is kind of ridiculous, it still manages to work and not feel like too far out there. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was watching was like, I totally understand why people are mad at Bob, but also, isn't this a really strong indictment for the state of the healthcare system that there's only one resuscitator within any sort of distance of here? Like, that seems like a problem.
Yeah, it does definitely. And I mean,
someone does mention that, like, oh, maybe now we'll get a second one now that Dr. Phillips died. But well, and there's this whole thing that, like,
Dr. Phillips has been essentially, he's keeping the hospital alive, but so much, like, everything is wrapped up in that. And that he isn't getting a lot of outside help. There's someone like, and I think that's one of the undercurrents as well, is that someone like Bob Merrick, who just has all of this money to do with what, like, he doesn't have to do anything, right? He quit, and there's this whole subplot about him having quit medical school because he just didn't care, essentially. And meanwhile, you've got a hospital that saves his life, right? That is on its last legs, that is like being held together simply by the virtues of this one doctor, who, as soon as the doctor dies, everything kind of hits the fan.
Yeah. And he just writes a check and thinks, oh, that's, I've done my part,
Yeah. And it does look really interestingly at class and about this, like, I can just write a check and it can go away. And the Jane Wyman character, yells at him about it. It's just like, oh, you think you can just fix this with money? Right. And it's like, so money can help, but that's not what this, someone is dead who should still be alive.
Yeah.
And it's because of your selfishness, not just your selfishness with money, but your selfishness with life, right? Your willingness to just put other people in danger. That, you think that you're separate from the rest of society. That's essentially what she's telling him. And he's not. He's a part of society. And that's what he has to learn. And that's what he does come to learn through kind of the development of this ethos of constantly giving without expecting thanks, giving without even wanting thanks. and doing it in order to benefit other people, not to reinforce his own desires.
Right. Yeah. Making sure, like, I will help you and make sure you never ever tell anybody. Like, that was a big part of Dr. Phillips's philosophy, and then that becomes part of his too.
Well, and the initial action when when Jane Wyman is blinded, is that he thinks, he's paid it forward, right? He's given money to this one guy whose wife is in the hospital. And then he's like, and then the Wyman character shows up and he's like, oh, the universe has rewarded me.
Right.
For doing this good thing, right? So now I'm going to take that. And that's what he doesn't understand about it. So he actually, because of his selfishness, he causes even more problems for other people. And so it's really interesting. There's this this externalization through the physical, because it's about death, it's about someone being blinded, etc. That through the physical, there's like this metaphysical existence outside of that, and it's about him learning and becoming a better person and contributing to the world, like saving, not just in his relationship with Jane Wyman, but in his relationship to everyone.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, and we did warn people we're gonna talk about the ending, and I just wanted to say that just what you were talking about with, like, he thinks he's been rewarded, but like, that's not what it's about. And so that's what is kind of interesting about the way that this ends, is once he finally has given himself into like doing his good works in secret, basically, he goes off and becomes this brilliant brain surgeon, and he's really taken to heart this lesson about just doing things for the good of other people and not for any sort of reward for himself. And so then he ultimately is rewarded in the end, because then Helen becomes sick far, far away. They haven't seen each other in years. He's been looking for her, and he finds out that she's sick and she needs this brain surgery, and he's like the only one that can do it. And so he does it, and then not only does he save her life, but he restores her vision, and they get to be together. So it's like, ultimately he still gets rewarded for all of the things he did by not seeking rewards.
Yeah, it's definitely like, there's definitely like a I don't know, like a Protestant ethos that is coming through there, that is just like, eventually, the universe really will reward you, but you have to be doing it. You have to be doing it for the right reasons.
Exactly.
And part of it is that it's not about selfishness. So he becomes like the only person who can save her life, right? And at one point he's like, I don't want to take that responsibility. But then it's like, you have to take that responsibility. Like, you have to actually be willing to do this, not for yourself, but for her, because she deserves a chance.
Right.
And then of course, yes, it all ends very happily, and it's very, it indicates that yes, they're going to be together and all of that. But it is like, you have to do these things for the right reasons, and then yes, you will get rewarded for it.
Yes.
But also, like, I think one of the things that Hudson pulls off, or he pulls off with all of these films, is that he is kind of this very masculine figure, but he can also play that sensitivity. And that's one of the things that works really well with someone, with a character like Bob Merrick, who starts out as being, this, oh, he's a playboy and everything, and then begins to see the actual consequences of his actions and doesn't know how to react. Like, he has depth and he has sensitivity, and he learns that sensitivity. And it becomes like, it isn't just giving of himself, but it's also the things that he wants. Like when he asks her to marry him at one point while she's still blind, and she's got this whole thing, you could talk about the ableism of all of this, but she's like, no, I don't want people to pity you. And it's like, he does not care. Like, and it's not even him being like, oh no, I want to show what a good guy I am. He's in love with her. It does not matter.
Yeah. He truly does fall in love with her. Yeah.
And I think that Hudson plays that really, really well, that there's never a question in the film, oh, he's doing this for, he's got an ulterior motive to show what a great guy he is, or like,
he feels guilty and he's doing it for that. Yeah,
for like penance or something. This isn't penance for him. He's in love with her.
Yeah.
So it is I think it's a fascinating film. It's less about the issues of sexuality, which we will get into in the next one. So let's talk about All That Heaven Allows. All That Heaven Allows was released in 1955, and again stars Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson in the leads. But and once again, Jane Wyman is a widow. I don't know why poor Jane Wyman keeps getting cast as a widow, but she's like a widow.
But this time it's not Rock Hudson's fault.
No, he didn't do anything wrong. But so she's a widow. She's kind of been widowed for a while. Everybody sort of is trying to get her together with a couple of other very boring guys. But she's in this very suburban space where she's bored and she's alone. She's got two kind of mostly grown children, both of whom I think are in college. And she's like basically bored and alone and lonely. And she meets Rock Hudson, who is a romantic gardener and is wants to grow trees for a living. Like that's his whole thing.
He's an arborist.
And she begins to fall in love with him. He begins to fall in love with her, and he kind of shows her this alternate way of living that is outside of this very staid, dull, stultifying country club society, and that causes problems with her own friends and especially with her children. Karen, you start on this. What do you think of this film?
I love this movie. I love this movie because I think that it really I think it does some very good things. Ultimately it's a movie about how people just need to mind their own damn business and let people be happy. That's really what this movie is about. But I love the complexity of emotions, and I think that's why I'm so drawn to it. You have this very vibrant relationship between these two people, Ron and Carrie. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it burns bright and very fast. You know, it's like they meet and they're instantly very attracted to each other because they each have something that the other has been missing in their lives. And when it's just the two of them, when they're just enjoying each other, it's very sweet. It's very romantic and just so nice to watch. And then as soon as they try to let other people, mostly her people, in on their happiness, everything starts to fall apart and it gets very complicated. Her kids have terrible opinions and her society friends are like, oh, he's not good enough for us, you know, and he's just a gardener. And and just the way that affects her. But I think what I really like is the journey that she kind of goes on, where she makes this choice to give him up for other people, which is probably something she's done for anything that interested her most of her life, other than she really didn't want a TV and chose not to have one. But like, no matter how much people pressured her, she did not want a TV. That was the one thing she would that one hill she would die on. But I think that once she makes that choice and gives him up for everybody else and really feels the impact of that and how much that hurts her, then when she starts to see how little people actually care, that's when she is finally able to kind of have the freedom to be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, screw you guys. I'm going to do what I want. But like mostly with her kids, like that's really what it comes down to. And that's why I say her kids suck. But a lot of kids suck.
Her kids suck, and her kids are really self-centered. But throughout so one of the undercurrents I think that runs throughout all of it is sexuality. Yes. And is this desire. So even like the guy that they want, that her kids and like everybody kind of wants her to get together with, he's older. And even when he talks, he's just like, well, you know, we're both older. We will be good companions.
Right.
Right. And she's sitting there like, I don't want like the undercurrent of it. And they're never going to say it. Right. In 1955, the undercurrent is she doesn't want companionship. She wants passion. Like she wants, you know, good sex.
Yeah.
You know, she and in fact, at one point it's revealed that she got married when she was 17. So she's been with, like, the implication, she's been with one man her entire life, and then he dies. And there's these references to, the widow being, in Egypt, right? The widow being walled up with the husband's possessions because she was a possession. Yeah. And the daughter is kind of talking about this, in sort of a distance way. And Carrie's standing there going like, oh yeah, I don't know what that feels like.
Which, by the way, at the time this movie came out, Jane Wyman, I don't know how old the character is supposed to be, but she was not even 40 yet. So it's like, yeah, she doesn't need to lock it up.
Yeah, well, and she's supposed to be, so I don't know how old, yeah, they never really say how old she's supposed to be, but she's supposed to be older than Rock Hudson. And that's the other thing, is that he's like, oh, he's not only is he of a lower class in some way, he's successful. Like, he runs a gardening business that he inherited from his father. He's growing, like, he's working to become an arborist. But there's this nascent sexuality underneath him that is like, a couple of times, I'm trying to remember if they ever refer to him as like Tarzan in this one, because they refer to him in Tarzan as Tarzan in Magnificent Obsession. But there's a couple of times where it's very heavily implied that, like, the reason why she is with him is purely for sex. And the reason why he is with her is purely for, like, money. Right. That there's no way and we, of course, the viewer knows that that is not true, but that's what the society implies. That's what her children imply. And there's also this continuous implication that her being with him is in some way a violation of their father. Yes. That she's disrespecting the memory of her dead husband. Like, the son complains about the fact that she moved his father's trophy, right, into the basement. Yeah, it's like, how dare you, right? But then, yeah, you get that other reveal, and what it turns into is that they want her to occupy this very specific role, and as long as she's in that role, it's fine. But they don't really care, right? She's in that role, and we're just going to leave her there because she's in her correct place, and we don't have to think about her anymore. And it's this really strong indictment of that society, and I think generally of 1950s society, of saying, like, women, particularly women, don't deserve passion, don't deserve love, should be these very specific things, and they should be happy in that place.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, okay, by the way, so Jane Wyman was 38 and Rock Hudson was 30 when this movie came out. So
so he was a younger man. Like,
he was a younger man. Yeah. And like, I mostly wouldn't date younger men right now because they want kids, and I don't, like, that's not going to happen. That ship has sailed. But so I get that. But yeah, like, it really does tie into this way that we, and still do, but especially in 1950s, housewife, like, gets put into this very specific box, and everybody expects her to just, feel,
be fine with it.
Yeah.
Accept it.
Yeah. Like, this is just the lot that you have in life. And yeah, it's too bad that you're a young widow, but you're still a middle-aged woman, and, like, just enjoy your TV and pass your time that way. Sorry, I'm really obsessed about the fact that she didn't want a TV and everybody wanted her to have one. Well, I don't understand not wanting a TV, but that's different.
It's symbolic. It's symbolic.
It is. I know.
Because it is. It's putting her off. It's essentially being like, okay, you've got your companionship, the TV. Right. You've got your home.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly that was, sorry, I was getting there, but yes, that's the thing. It's like, I make jokes like, oh, I can't understand not wanting a TV, but that's what I do. If I'm sitting, I live alone, and when I'm home, the TV is mostly on because then it's sound. It's, it's something in the background. It makes it feel less like I'm alone in my house, and that's exactly what that is. That's exactly what people want for her, is to just like, oh, just have a TV as your companion. You'll be fine. And this old man who's also probably going to die again soon. And then you're going to be twice a widow before you're 50. but be fine with it. It's fine. You have money and friends and kids who will occasionally visit you, but not at Christmas. So,
Yeah, it's this like it really depicts how particularly how women get forgotten.
yes.
And widows get forgotten. Like, she is defined wholly by her relationship to her dead husband.
Mm-hmm.
And she finds this, and one of the things that's represented throughout is that not just Ron himself, but everyone around him, his friends, right? There's this life and celebration and joy going on. And it doesn't matter how, like, and one of the things I like about the party sequences, so we see the party at I think it's Mick is Ron's friend, at Mick's house, and it's people of all different classes, genders, ages, etc. So it isn't about age. It isn't like you've got to be young and excited. It's just like you just have to choose that this is your life. And that does mean that you have to sacrifice certain things. One of the things that she has to choose about whether or not she's going to sacrifice is that country club set, right? Is that really fulfilling for her? Are those the friends that she wants to have? And it doesn't show it as being an easy thing, but it does depict like how destructive it can, how not just destructive, just like soul sucking.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, she's not allowed to live. Her husband is dead, and so she's dead. She's walled up with his possessions.
Right.
And it's really, really well done. And it's interesting to have like Hudson as this representative of this free living authentically, right? Living free. And the way that you actually want to live and with the people that you actually want to be with versus what, society tells you are supposed to want and supposed to be. Because ultimately, yeah, her kids don't wind up caring. Her kids just want her to be at home, mom, in the correct space for them whenever
they just want her
need
to be available, for them. And other than that, and like they're not even thinking about her. Like, her at one point late in the movie, she finds out her son just got a job overseas, or he's getting a job overseas or something. And he's like, oh yeah, I was gonna tell you. Like, that's a major life change, and he didn't even, like, his mom was not one of the first people that he told. Probably everybody in his life knows except for his mom. And like, she's not his number one priority, which I think to an extent, when kids are growing up, like once they're I think your life does need to not revolve around your parents. But also, if you expect your mom to be like there for you all the time, then you need to let her in on what's happening with your life too. Call your parents, people. That's what I'm saying.
That's the thing. It's that insistence that she not exist,
right?
Except in reference to them, but that they can live their own lives. Like, if it was just them, like, okay, we're grown up now. It's like, yeah, he's grown up. He should go off and work and do his thing. The daughter is going to get married. All that's like, okay, yes, that's normal, right?
And also didn't rush to tell her mom right away that she was engaged either. So yeah.
I like that little undercurrent. There's that moment where, she's like, well, you're, Carrie's like, well, you're awfully young, right? and Josh says, well, you got married when you were 17. And there is just this moment of like, do you know what's coming? Like, what the possibilities are? Like, and there's never an indication that Carrie was unhappy with her husband. Or that he wasn't a good man or anything like that, but that it's obvious that she recognizes, especially through her relationship with Ron, that there's a lot that she didn't do as a human, as a full human being.
Right.
Because what she was at the age of 17 was a wife and then a mother. And those were the things that defined her, not who she was as a person.
Exactly. And then her husband died and left her a widow at not a widow's age, Yeah. Like, she was still even though she's older than Ron, she's a young widow. And also I think that her having that conversation with her daughter also, even though this is only the 1950s, it does show like there is progression. Like, her daughter doesn't have to get married at such a young age just because she did, because the world has progressed. Things are a little different now. Her daughter has more opportunities than she did, just like her daughter's daughters will have more opportunities you know,
Her-
when it comes around. And
her daughter's daughter is gonna go move to New York City and become a hippie. That's what's gonna happen there.
Yes, exactly.
Like that girl's gonna be just the right age in the 1970s.
Yep, it's so true. So good luck to you there. You sure you want to get married now?
Yeah, you're gonna break out of suburbia pretty fucking fast, man.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at grandma and be like, well, grandma had got a younger man.
Yes.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's a fascinating film, and I do think it's interesting to put Hudson as this kind of, you know, he's very earthy, he's very romantic, he's very intense, and he's very dedicated to the life that he has chosen for himself as well. And it's interesting to see him as this kind of representation of authenticity. And then also there's a conversation that they have at one point where he's talking about, I think he's talking about his friend Mick, and like that he kind of had to teach Mick, as it were, how to live more authentically, and make the choice that he needed to make. And he says, you've got to be a man. And she turns to him and says, and now you want me to be a man.
mm-hmm.
and he says, well, just in that one way. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, they have to know that, like, they have to be aware of this line, given everything that we know about Hudson. And it is just like this little, oh, so you want me to be a man? It's just like, yeah.
I mean, yes.
But it's interesting to be like, you have to live like a man, right? You have to choose that. And that's an interesting element underneath the you know, everything else that is going on in the story, is that she has to be a man. She has to behave in the way that a man would, given the same kind of choice. Yeah. If she was male, she would have a very different existence. And that's something that the film is definitely highlighting, is the fact of her femininity is what is stopping her, is what is limiting her, not just in herself, but from the rest of society.
Yeah. Well, I think it also, like, when they have their scene, because they've gotten engaged and then nobody's happy for them, and they end up deciding to call it off. And I think it's really interesting in the scene where they do that, and how he really takes that as like, she's not willing to give up her life. And it's like, okay, but you're not either, you know? And I think there is a lot of focus on Carrie in this, and kind of where she's at, and all of the societal pressures that she's under, and pressure with her kids and everything, where he doesn't have that. His friends are very willing to accept her for exactly who she is. But he, it's like, he just has this expectation that they're just going to live where he wants and do what he wants. And I really like the fact that she's the one that says, you know what, this isn't going to work, and walks away. And because I think that, just like what I was saying, like, she's not ready to give up her life, but he's not even willing to consider giving up what he wants. Like, it's not all on her. Like, she's not the only one here who's not willing to make some concessions so that they can be together. And I like that. And I like that that's something where later you do see how much he, you know, how sad he is over this. And he really does clearly miss her and everything. And I think it's good to, I feel like they do make that point, and I appreciate that they made that point.
And she has to be in a place where she decides that that's what she actually wants too.
Right.
And I understand, like, his argument is not incorrect. Like, you know, oh, so we'll live here, I'll become like them, right? I'll become like those people. And I think he even says to her, like, I know that I will, because you are someone that I would do that for. Like, and at the same time, you know, I think that he's got an awareness that it would kill him, that it would destroy, destroy the person that he is. And so there is this moment of like, they, at that point, for both of them, they actually cannot be together, because she has decisions that she has to make, and choices that she has to make, and things that she has to understand. And so does he. And he comes to realize, like, he misses her and he wants her. Like, he remakes the entire mill for her, right? That's really what it's about. It's like, I'm going to make this a home for the woman that I love. and that's like he begins choosing that's the life that he wants with her, and she also has to choose what kind of a life she wants, and if it's not compatible with him, then it isn't. It's just that's the choice. And it all turns out well in the end.
It does. It does.
So
I really like this movie a lot.
It's gorgeously photographed too. Like the colors are just spectacular. I know. So I own the Criterion Blu-ray of this one, and I also own Written on the Wind. I've got to buy Magnificent Obsession actually. But the colors on the Blu-ray are so gorgeous. They are just like pristine. Like the lighting that Sirk uses, Sirk is really good at externalizing everything. So like the emotions of the characters exist in the landscape around them and in the colors around them, and like in their clothing and everything. It's so well, the color design is amazing. Yeah, highly recommend watching the Blu-ray if you can. So the last one we wanted to talk about is from the really takes on masculinity. I think All That Heaven Allows is kind of like femininity, and Written on the Wind is masculinity. So Written on the Wind is 1956, and this is called, some people refer to this as a Southern Gothic melodrama, which is an interesting way of describing it. And this stars Rock Hudson, Lauren Bacall, Robert Stack, and Dorothy Malone. And this is one where Hudson actually takes a back seat a lot of the time. It's for a while it becomes Dorothy Malone's film, which I find really fascinating. And so this is a film about Kyle, played by Robert Stack, who is a playboy and Texas oil heir, and his best friend, what is his best friend's name? Mitch, played by Rock Hudson, who is like the boy who made good, basically. But he's Kyle's best friend, and he's brilliant, but he's not as wealthy as Kyle. And Kyle meets and marries Lauren Bacall. And for a while, everything is great. He gives up alcohol. He's trying to be a good husband and a good person, etc. And then, horror of horrors, he finds out that he's probably sterile. And this kind of spirals outward into him turning back to alcohol. Meanwhile, Mitch has fallen in love with his wife, and Kyle's younger sister, Mary Lee, played by Dorothy Malone, is just causing all kinds of havoc and sleeping with everybody, and is like got this very intense obsession focused on Mitch, and is sort of realizing that Mitch's feelings for Kyle's wife are much more real than she thought. Karen, is this the first time you saw Written on the Wind?
This was the first time I saw Written on the Wind.
What did you think? Because I love this film so much.
It's so good. It's so good. One thing I just wanted to, well, two things I just wanted to say though. The doctor is very clear that this doesn't mean he's sterile. It just means that he has to be strengthened. He's weak.
I think we have to talk about this.
We will come back to that in a second.
All right.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is this is one of, like, this comes out in 1956, and I just, the way that Robert Stack's character is described as like a playboy, whereas his sister is described as a slut. I think I read one thing where someone called her a nymphomaniac. I'm just like, wait a second, hold on. Let's talk about the differences in how men and women are treated for liking the same thing, which is sex. Like, come on.
But I have to say though, the Dorothy Malone character, she gives a fantastic performance.
Oh, she does. She really
is
does.
so good, and she's one of those like just like sitting there going like, I hate you, but also I understand you, and I feel sympathy for you, and you need to do the right. Like, she is so complicated, and this is a character that could have been such a basic, like, evil. She kind of basically the evil temptress or the evil slut or whatever, and she is so complicated. And they do, and I really think that comes down to Dorothy Malone's performance, because she gets so much into that character.
Absolutely. Like what she gives to Mary Lee, she's this self-destructive person because, she was the girl. So her father wasn't going to turn the oil empire over to her, and so she's always in her brother's shadow, but also her brother was never really a great example either. And so it's like they just like neither of these two, Kyle and Mary Lee, neither of them really, I mean, it's one of those situations where they have so much, they're very wealthy and they have so much opportunity and so much available to them, but yet because of the way that they were raised and because of what they didn't get in their childhood, love and affection and being set on the right path from the beginning, it really set both of them into just these disastrous, futures. And and it's like, it's great performances I agree with you. Dorothy Malone is fantastic, but I also think it's great from Robert Stack, who, by the way, I still sometimes when I see him in things that are not unsolved mysteries, I get very confused, but but anyway, but no, overall, I thought this was a really good film. It's, it deals with some very complicated issues in general, but especially for the time period, the way that it deals with things like masculinity and fertility and yeah, I think that it handles all of that really in just such compelling ways. It's such a fascinating film to watch. Very well performed, very beautifully shot. And yeah, it's overall, it's a good story that just is quite captivating.
Yeah. Well, to go back to the so Kyle and Mary Lee, they both feel inadequate. And they deal with that in different ways. They feel like they are lesser in some way. And Mary Lee kind of uses her sexuality in order to sort of try to make herself feel adequate. And Kyle uses primarily alcohol.
Right.
And they're both desperate for approval. They're both desperate to prove themselves. And the things that the self-destructive things that they do, like, don't work, basically.
Yeah.
Like what Mary Lee really wants is she wants to be loved. She really does want to be loved. And she wants Mitch to love her, but she's going about it in all the wrong ways. And there's also the fact that Mitch just doesn't love her. Like, he's not in love with her, and she can't let that go. He sees her
as a sister. Yeah.
Yeah. And she can't let that go. And so she's using, she even says to him a couple, like, I'll have you, right? Like, she keeps on going on about, like, she's going to get him sexually. It's like, and at a certain point, it's like, you might, but that's not going to be the thing that you actually want. That's not going to satisfy you. Right. Because what you really want is for him to love you, and he doesn't.
Yeah, and never will, because he will never see her that way.
Yeah, and then Kyle, it is a similar thing, that he's constantly seeking for this reinforcement of his maleness and his masculinity and his lovability, and he doesn't recognize the love that is actually right there in front of him, that his wife does love him. And it isn't about whether or not they can have children. It isn't about his money or anything like that. She loves him. What she sees in him is the sadness and the kindness and the things that are underneath all of his attempts to kind of perform this form of masculinity. And that's what she loves about him, and that's what she sees in him, and that's what he keeps on sacrificing. He keeps on destroying those parts of himself.
Yeah.
And then he thinks, oh, she's going off with my best friend who is male and virile. And what she really wants is for him to be that, for him to be kind and gentle and all of the things that Mitch actually represents. So let's talk about that issue of masculinity and male infertility, because this film goes into that in a really surprisingly explicit way.
Yes.
For the time period. So it becomes clear that, the doctor,
honestly, for any time period, sorry, like, this isn't even something that you see really dealt with in movies now either.
Yeah, you very often when you talk about infertility or sterility, it's in reference to a woman not being able to have children. And here we've got a man, and then also like there's this whole thing about like having children is really important to him. It's and I think that the undercurrent is that it's proof of his masculinity.
Yeah.
And he's essentially told, it's, but again, I think you mentioned our conversation the other night about like, this is the worst possible way that you can tell someone that they have a low sperm count. It isn't a fail. It's a weakness. It's like, first of all, don't say that. Second of all, don't say that to this man.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also like just, films represent our experiences and everybody wants to see themselves represented on screen. And I also was really taken with like, gosh, this really deals with that head on. And it, like you said, it's very explicit about this issue for Kyle. And I just thought, man, there were men who were dealing with this very privately in the 1950s who went to see this movie and they're basically being told, you're weak, you suck, like that's what they're hearing. That's the message they're hearing. So it's like, kudos to them for going there with this issue, but also that's kind of not the way that is helpful to anybody.
Well, and I think that the film is trying to deal with something that is difficult to talk about on screen without actually using the words, right?
Right, because they weren't allowed to. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a low sperm count. Like that's what they think. And which does not mean that he is not able to have children. And there's this whole conversation that kind of gets going about it. But what his reaction to it is, I'm not a man, right? I am not, or I am a lesser man. Yeah. And it continues to turn very much, particularly around his friend, and his sense of inadequacy in comparison to Mitch, that Mitch is always this pinnacle of what when they were children, of what a boy should be, and then this pinnacle of what a man should be. And he is not that. And it drives him crazy. And it also ultimately leads to some really, really dark and horrible places. But it is like that. The film's, I think, very much indicting that, is saying like, treating masculinity as being this thing that you can obtain, and that if you're not like that, you're inadequate as a human being or as a man. And that this is all centered around your ability to have children, your ability to get married, to satisfy your wife, all of those things. It's really important. It's amazing that this film in this period is kind of willing to go there and willing to also say like the way that we are approaching masculinity is really fucking damaging.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And because it leads to some dire consequences and tragedy. And I think that it's a really good, I think you just used this word, but a good indictment of that mentality, because there's so much more. Mitch doesn't have children in this movie, so who's to say that he's not also, suffering from a similar problem? We just never know, because it's not an issue for him. That's not what, he's not married. We're not looking at him, but there's just this assumption that this is something that is singular to Kyle, and that this is just further proof that he's never going to be the man that his father wanted him to be, where Mitch is.
And it runs throughout the film. Like we see him at one point getting into a fight to defend his sister, like this guy who's like, hitting on, and his sister keeps on ripping on his masculinity, and elevating Mitch, being like, look how badass Mitch is, look how tough Mitch is, right. And Mitch is sitting there. Mitch finally gets involved because it's quite obvious that Kyle's going to get his ass kicked. But it's this continuous reinforcement that you are not manly enough. And again, interesting that Hudson occupies that space of being like, he's the real man. And then he's the one who also then gets accused of having an affair with his best friend's wife. Poor Mitch, half the time he's sitting there going like, I am just in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault.
Yeah. Well, and it's sad too, because he does love Kyle's wife. He loves Lauren Bacall's character. I can't think of her name. Lucy. He loves Lucy, but he can't admit that because that's his best friend's wife and he's
Mhm.
never going to talk about that. And so it's like he's being accused of things where it's like it's not based completely in non-reality, but it's not true. Like that goes against Mitch's character completely. But
Yeah, he's never, he does tell Lucy his feelings.
yeah.
Because he's leaving like at the beginning of the next week, and she's basically like, by the way, I'm pregnant with my husband's child. And but it is this, like, you know, he does say that, and he struggles with the feelings that he has, but he's, you know, he's also very much like, it's not me, like that child would have been yours, right? And it's very much coming back to Kyle's self-destructiveness and the destruction of the, like you say, the way that he was brought up, the way that him and Mary Lee were brought up, and this continuous sense that he was inadequate as a son and as a husband. He's, you know, inadequate in all of the ways that men are supposed to be adequate.
Right.
And he can't get past that, and it ultimately destroys him.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts on Written on the Wind?
No, it's very, very good.
It is very good.
Yeah, it's definitely one where it kind of feels like a powder keg movie where there's a lot of things, there's like a very long fuse and you can really see things coming, but then it kind of everything blows up at the end. And there's and emotionally and also literally sort of, and but then there's fallout to that too. And so it's interesting because ultimately it ends up being Mary Lee who has this opportunity to just destroy people's lives, like she has, that falls to her, and what she chooses to do. Yeah, it's interesting because I think it very easily could have ended with I mean, we've spoiled everything else. We can spoil this,
yeah,
right?
We can spoil the ending.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this big like standoff basically between Kyle and Mitch. So Kyle hit Lucy and caused a miscarriage, like punched her a lot, caused a miscarriage. He leaves. Mitch is like, if he comes back tonight, I'm going to kill him. Kyle comes back. Kyle ends up dead, but Mitch didn't do it. There was a struggle between Kyle and Mary Lee for the gun. Kyle ends up dead. And that could be where it ended, but instead now we have Mary Lee. And I think this is part of why Dorothy Malone is such a standout in this too, is because they really do make Mary Lee a full character as well.
Yeah.
Like she's not on the sideline. And so once this happens, it now falls to her because there's an inquest and she has all the power in her hands, because she could say Mitch killed Kyle and everyone would believe her.
Yeah.
Because not only because Mitch had said, oh, I'm going to kill him, but like out of like a passionate response, not out of any sort of actual intent, but he did say those words. But also, who's going to believe Mitch, this like poor kid who was always just around the family, versus the daughter of the oil baron? So
Yeah.
So she has Mitch's life in her hands. She has all the power, and so she gets to make that choice to tell the truth or not tell the truth in the end. And that's the thing, is like I love that it really brings closure to everybody's story, because for her, telling the truth about Mitch is a big deal, because that's her finally letting go, because she could punish him by ruining his life, and she chooses not to do that.
Yeah, she even at one point, like before that, she says that, you know, oh, if you marry me, I won't testify against you, right? Because you can't compel a woman to testify against her husband, like all of that. And there's this continued that she and I think right up until, I don't think she makes the decision even, right up until she actually, you know, gets to talking about what happened. And there is this tension about, like, she could plausibly, based upon what we know about her character, she could plausibly lie and say that Mitch did it, and she could plausibly tell the truth. And it's wonderful in her performance, the choice that she makes, and then this ultimate feeling that, you know, Mitch and Lucy go off together, and it's like she's left there in this house without her father, without her brother, but she has all like it's implied that she's going to run the empire, the oil empire, and that's going to be the choice that she has made. And it's tragic in some ways, but it's also almost like, she has a chance, I guess, like in a way that she didn't before. And so much of that comes down to Dorothy Malone's performance and how she plays those scenes.
Yes.
It's
very good.
It is very good. And all of these films, again, are right now available to stream on Prime. Also, you dig Douglas Sirk, I really recommend getting the Blu-rays on Criterion. They are gorgeous, like just really beautifully done. And especially with these films, that there's so much emphasis on color. And that's really important to get to see as well, to get it really crisp and bright.
Yeah, I would like to see these on Criterion. I haven't.
So yeah, I think that's gonna close us out for this week. Any final thoughts on Rock Hudson and Douglas Sirk?
Just they're great, and these movies are great. That's it.
Yes, and it is worth, like, Hudson kind of gets boiled down to sort of the like I say, the all-American male. I think he gives great performances in these films. And in melodramas that are, kind of extreme and strange and soap opera-y, but that are just so well done and do actually affect you emotionally. So he's wonderful in these films.
He was only nominated for one Oscar, and that was for Giant. He did not win.
He's better in these films than he is in Giant.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think that will close us out for this week. Thanks to everyone for listening to us, and especially a big thank you to our patrons, who include Abby, Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. And we also have a new patron. I think Noelle, please correct me if I'm incorrect on that, please correct me. Who has just recently joined us. And by the way, I should hopefully be getting your pins and stickers and things like that out to you before long. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to join one of their number, our Patreon is patreon.com/citizendame. We also have an Etsy store, etsy.com/shop/citizendamepod, and a Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. And of course, you can go to our website, citizendamepod.com, and email us if you feel like getting in touch with us with your thoughts, feelings, issues, stuff you want us to talk about. We are citizendamepod@gmail.com. And we are also on the various socials. Are we still on Twitter?
Yeah, kind of.
So you're on Twitter and Instagram @CitizenDamePod, and we are a Letterboxd HQ @CitizenDame. And of course, you can get in touch with us individually. Karen, where are you?
I am on all the socials at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Instagram and Letterboxd @LHBusiness. And I think that will close us out for this week. Thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Bye.
At agricultural school, I got interested in trees, so I started growing them.
What kind of trees?
All kinds. White fir, Douglas fir, silvertip spruce.
Do I have any?
No. But you have some just as interesting, like this Kelroteria. China, where it comes from, they call it the golden rain tree. Beautiful, isn't it? They say it can only thrive near a home where there's love.
It's a beautiful legend.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd better get back to work. Thank you for the coffee.